This lens has been on the market, I think, since November of last year. That would be 2017. And I did a rather long review both at my website, I think, we'll have to check on that later, and on Leica Rumors. So some of the images that I will share today, both of this lens, as well as the pictures that I took with it, are already online. But I wanted to do a video because I've got the material ready, and actually I had a couple of people ask me, I can't remember if it was on this channel or if it was on Twitter, about this lens. So let's pretend that we're not doing an unboxing here and just flip the top, and we're not going to talk about dummy tabs. Not going to do it. Not going to talk about the literature here. By the way, I purchased it, I think, at Map Camera last year. Not going to talk about the packaging. Just going to whip out the lens here. Then we are going to put the box and the literature down and try to hide the cheat sheet behind the Leica. Box is down. Okay, ladies and gents, we now have the lens, the subject of today's video, here in front of us. It has the same rather crappy pinch tab that most Voigtländers have, but it has a very cool logo. I can't say how happy I am about this logo. It's damn good. And inside the lens, or that's really not the way to say it, the lens, as you can see, has 10 aperture blades, as do most Voigtländer lenses for Leica, and I think maybe they're SLRs. They're straight, and the helicoid is smooth. Listen to that, it's pretty good. I would say the helicoid is just about on par with Leica. And this lens has kind of clicky sounding aperture blades, but nothing that's going crazy. It's not like high pitched, and it's not grindy. One of my Leica lenses, the Aspherical 28 2.8, it's called an Elmarit, has kind of grindy sort of aperture clicks, but it's a damn good lens. Extremely sharp, wonderful color, almost no distortion. This lens has a bit of distortion. We'll get to that. Before we get to that, there's a couple of unique things about this lens. Let me twist this down to 0.7 meters, if you can take a look. You'll notice that the lens actually goes down to 0.5, which means that if you put it on a non-Leica camera, or if you put on your VisuFlex, or if you use live view, if you're not, of course, if you're using your digital, that you can focus beyond the rangefinder coupling, which goes down to 0.7 on your camera. Which means if you're just used to ratcheting the lens down to its lowest or closest focus and then going in for your rangefinder focus, like moving in like this, click, you'll be really out of focus. So you do have to sort of pay attention to that. Another thing I want to mention, which I mentioned in the last video, is this is the horrible rear lens cap that comes with the Voigtländer. As you can see, there are two walls on the inside, and the wall on the inside and the outside tend to flex, and they don't hold on even to the Voigtländer lenses that well. I'm not doing a good job showing it to you, but it pops off easier than most lens caps do. I'm not a fan of that. And I'm not really a fan of the way this lens looks. It has the look of the Aspherical 35 1.2. Fat on the bottom, straight up the top, nice knurled focus ring, but nothing that's really beautiful. If you want to see beautiful, as you saw in my the video where I showed the Ultra next to the 7 Artisans lens, here is not the Ultra, but this is the original classic remake that Voigtländer did of the 50 1.5. Beautiful lens. It looks like, well, it doesn't look exactly like, but it looks quite like the lens that came with a Prominent, the Voigtländer Prominent. Beautiful lens. Wonderful rendering. Cheat sheet time. Okay, classic 1.5, looks like 1.5. Okay, optics. Flare's not too bad on this lens, actually. As long as you keep the sun at the right angle, it won't really occlude much of the frame at all. You'll notice, though, in this image of my daughter, that it is occluding most of the image. Now, that only happened to me about 5 out of maybe 30 or 40 photographs. So as long as you keep track of the angle and what you're shooting and where the sun is coming in, then you don't have to worry about flare so much. But it's there, so please keep that in mind. Cheat sheet time. Aha! Distortion. There is a bit of distortion. It's nothing bad. It's nothing like the 7 Artisans, which goes out like this. The distortion is a bit of a mustache or a lip shape, but it's minor. Now, I don't know how to correct it. I've never tried to correct it in Lightroom or anything, but I assume that if you know your maths, you might be able to do it. And also, shading is pretty extreme, of course, in the corners, and sharpness is pretty damn good in the center. In fact, for such a fast lens, I was expecting something a little bit more hazy and a little bit softer, but this lens actually does a very good job. Now, I did talk about the aperture blades before, but I didn't really talk about the aperture ring. Now, one thing I don't like about this lens is that as you stop down, you will notice that the aperture markings get closer and closer to each other. Now, that isn't necessarily a problem. A lot of classic lenses had that, and I think that a lot of people that will use this lens will not be bothered by that at all. It's just an aesthetic thing that I don't really appreciate, especially in a lens that costs about $1,000. Now, of course, as a $1,000 lens, and from Voigtländer, it's made pretty well. Now, the lens caps aside, you'll notice that the rear element does not protrude too far through the bottom of the lens. So I imagine that if you put this on your Sony or you put this on your Leica SL, that it won't shade the corners too much worse than it would on your Leica. The helicoid is smooth, the lens is heavy, really well machined. All of these markings are engraved and paint filled. And that goes for the markings on the front of the lens, as well as the distance markers along the sides and the back. And it's perfectly lined up at infinity. The distance scale, as you can imagine, for a 40 millimeter lens, isn't exactly expansive, but it does the job and it's well labeled. It feels good in the hand, but it's not, here's the rub. I spent about $1,000 on it, and I wish I would have rented it instead. The Bokeh has a number of problems, for me at least. That is, in the corner, if you have especially foliage in the background and wide open, the bokeh up in the corner ends up being triangular. And you might like your triangular bokeh. I don't typically like it. And I don't really like the fall off of this lens. The bokeh can be very nice up close, depending on the subject and of course depending on the background. But in general, this is not a lens that I would buy for the bokeh. Whereas the 50-1.5 has wonderful bokeh just basically everywhere. The other thing is, this is an aspherical lens. Now, if you like your aspherical lenses, I guess you like it because it gives better illumination, maybe sharpness. I'm not sure. Maybe it keeps the lens smaller. That's what people say. I don't know. But there's the onion thing. And that's not the ogre thing, it's the onion thing. It means that the bokeh elements on bright point lights will end up having onion concentric circles all the way to the center. So if that doesn't bother you and you don't do a lot of Christmas tree lights, or you're not shooting Christmas all year round, like I tend to do because we don't clean up our Christmas stuff until it's a little bit too late, well then maybe it doesn't bother you. But if you're shooting a lot of point lights, you will notice onion rings. Onion rings, onion rings. And the same problem with this lens, of course, which is an aspherical. It's a good lens. It's relatively sharp, has a little bit of a dreamy sort of transition between sharp focus and sort of the surrounding area, wide open. And it gets sharp down there, or once you stop it down. I think a lot of people probably like it. They'll certainly like the 1.2. They'll like the fact that it's not too big. They may not like the price. It's not cheap. I, however, I'm not one of those people, and I've not used the lens for the last 3 or 4 months. In fact, I've got it upstairs, like I said, in that box, meaning to sell it. Somebody bought it on Yahoo Auction, and at the end they're like, nah, don't want it. I don't know why they did that. But anyway, if you like 1.4, if you like the 40 millimeter frame lines, you might like this lens. Of course, if you're using it on a Leica M, and the Leica M, at least the modern ones, don't have 40 millimeter frame lines, then this camera wakes up the, now I don't have a card ready, silly me. But this camera wakes up the 50 millimeter frame lines. That's a good idea. Now the 40 is closer to 35 in terms of focal length, but If this woke up the 35 frame lines, what you do is you'd frame it, you'd think you have what you need in focus, or you have what you need in focus, you think you have framed everything properly, and then you find out that you've actually taken less of the image than the camera indicated. Thankfully, of course, this is 50mm frame lines. It brings up 50mm frame lines, which means that you will capture more of the image than you intended to. So if you want to crop a little bit later, or if you just want to have a little bit of leeway, you have it. So that's a good thing. I think Voigtländer did a good job to go for that rather than a 35. The last thing I really want to look at is the mount. One thing I really like about Voigtländer lenses is that on the mount, they have flathead screws rather than Phillips. The good thing about this is, if you are going to, don't do it, it's a brand new lens, but if you get it used and maybe it needs a little bit of cleaning and you don't want to take it to, or you don't want to take it to a professional, you can do it a little bit more easily yourself. A Phillips or a plus head screwdriver will be easier to strip, or is often easier to strip. So I find that these screws are nicer. In fact, I like them better than the Leica screws on their lenses, and I think that Voigtländer have chosen really well. This segment of the video is brought to you by the crappiness of the Fujifilm X-H1s 4K, which is limited to 15 minutes. And in those 15 minutes, it chops up videos every 5 minutes or so. Horrible, 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 horrible. Anyway, I lost a whole segment, and that segment was me taking this lens up, putting it up to the microphone, and showing you the sound of the helicoid. So let's do that. Here's the sound of the helicoid. It's minimal. It's smooth. There's only a little bit of grating at the far ends, and the grating is very fine, like you would get in a very fine tracing paper. So nothing to worry about. The sound of the Nokton Classic is this. About as smooth as you can get. Both lenses are free of play, which is very nice. Very much like a higher end Leica. And if you're doing, I'm just going to say this, if you're doing video, I don't know anything about video. If you're doing video, it's going to be really nice because you don't have to worry about play. But it's a nice helicoid. Again, it's not as nice as Voigtländer's classic line. They just really are a step above. But anyway, that's basically the end of this video. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope that you'll stick around. I hope that you leave a thumbs up if you like the video and a thumbs down if you don't. And if you don't like it, I really would appreciate you giving me a comment. So, thumbs down with nothing to criticize constructively, then I can't really fix the problem. And you got to stick around because I swear, I'm finishing that SL versus X-H1 next 2 segments of videos. It's coming. Don't worry about that. As well, there's a lot more rangefinder content coming. At least as long as I have rangefinder lenses. I've got a few. I want to show them on this camera. I want to show the images that they take. But eventually I'll exhaust my lenses and I'll have to do comparisons, and then I'll have to do something else to kind of keep your interest. Anyway, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.